I'm Dr. Michael Latola.
And I'm Megan Strong.
Megan shares the world's worst dessert recipe. I become obsessed with the term petrified peanut, and a doctor wants to know how to cut off Bruxer. That and more on today's Chairside Live.
It is not the worst.
I know it.
Gosh.
Welcome to episode 39 of Chairside Live. Megan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Never better. We've got a great episode for you today. We've got a case of the week. I was walking through our partial denture department, and I saw a couple things that caught my eyes. These aren't really typical partial cases per se, but things that you may not know that we're able to provide for you in conjunction with a partial denture and a couple different kinds of partial dentures. In fact, let's go ahead and take a look at the case of the week right now. I was walking through the partial denture department the other day, and I saw something that is a feature that I think is kind of unique to our lab. There might be other labs doing it as well, but I'm really only familiar with ours, and I think it's a fantastic service, and not nearly as many dentists take advantage of it as probably should, because I don't think they know it exists. So for example, we have a dentist who wants to make a lower partial denture. Pretty straightforward, but some concerns. So he sends in a pre-op model to us so we can take a look at it and see what's going on. And what most doctors don't know that we do is that we have a design service. And so I just want to show you what the design service came up with here. And so from that model, we're able to pour it up, and then we take a digital picture where we point some things out to the dentist, some things that are going to make this a more successful partial denture if you follow along. And so the dentist sends us that preliminary impression before they've done anything, and you can see some notes that were made here. We want some buccolingual rests that are being done here. We want to put a crib class here. We want to put a clinically prepared groove on this tooth to get some retention. You can see there's some spots here where they want the doctor to reduce to help level out the occlusion. And really, it's just basically a recipe for how you want to treat this case. I know that I did, of course, learn a lot about partial dentures in dental school, or maybe I think I did. I'm not sure, because I've forgotten most of it now. In fact, it takes me a few minutes to remember the Kennedy classifications if I'm pressed on that. But whenever I do a partial here in the laboratory, I get this design service because it tells you exactly what to do and where to do it. And so it's written on here, and then there's a couple different other shots of the models as well in case you're having difficulty seeing one of the area. They shoot it from both sides as well. So it's really pretty clear where they want the rests, where they want guide planes, where they want teeth recontoured and occlusion adjusted. And again, these are really just suggestions for what to do to give yourself the best chance of having a very successful case. There's a nominal charge for this service. I think it's $50, but if you have the partial made here at the laboratory, then that gets applied to the overall fee of the case. So you end up getting it for free, essentially, if you have the partial made here. And honestly, I don't really know of any dentists who are having the design service done here and then having the partial made somewhere else. So once the doctor gets this back, he tries to accomplish most or all of what is on that list, and we have some nice rest preparations. And of course, with the custom tray, we're able to see where those tori are, and so we know to stay away from there. And the one thing, I don't know if you noticed it, but they actually asked the doctor to do some clinical line angle modifications here on tooth number 23. And it might be a little hard to see those markings on the print, and so of course it's always marked on the model as well. And you can see those two areas where they wanted that reduced. They wanted to kind of thin that tooth mesiodistally and make it a little bit more shaped like the neck of that tooth. And you'll see why. This is actually going to be an issue as we take the partial framework and try to put this into place. It's almost difficult. You can see how it's almost scraping the tooth there as we go by there. And I can just kind of wiggle it down into place, and there it snaps down into place. So you can see the major connector has to go down, has to have this cutout in it right here because of the fact that it needs to get around the wider part of the tooth. So the doctor did a great job prepping things like the rest preps, but when we come to this area, had those been recontoured, and I would use a sandpaper disc here, I'd be a little afraid to use a burr there. Well, I might use a burr, but I think I would take a heavy grit sandpaper disc and go in there and flatten it and not use a burr, knowing that I'm probably going to get a better, flatter result like that. And had those been reduced a little bit and the thickness, the mesiodistal thickness of that tooth been reduced, we would have been able to take this major connector and wrap it along the back here because it does provide good support for those lower anterior teeth having there in the back. But we did have to have the cutout there to allow this, the path of insertion for the frame to go into place with that tooth positioned where it is lingually and being as wide as it is. But basically what I wanted to share with you is the design service that we have for our partial dentures. So you don't have to recall everything you learned in dental school about rest preps, guide planes, and class. You can just rely on our design people to help you out with that. And as I was walking around the department, I typically tend to think of dentures, whether they're full dentures or partial dentures, as being kind of a low-tech department compared to all the exciting things we do over in the fixed department, milling Bruxer and Emax and printing parts for PFMs. And I was surprised to see that CAD-CAM has actually made a splash into the partial denture department as well. And it's pretty amazing to watch them design on the screen. They can actually design these partial frameworks on the screen, and then they print them on a 3D printer. So this is actually a resin material. It's definitely more hardy than it would be when it was waxed directly on the model, and you can see it's nice and thin because it's so strong, and the clasps actually can bend a little bit. It can be tried on and off the model, and it's really a fantastic way to be able to do it. And what they notice is when they print these in resin and then invest and burn them out and then cast it, that they're really getting some nice dense castings. And so they fit great, and they've got these CAD-CAM partials have a very low return rate back to the laboratory. They just seem to be very dimensionally stable and fit better than the regular waxed ones. So they polish nicely, and they're very nice and dense and dimensionally stable. And there's only certain cases still where we can do it, but those indications continue to expand. And it's interesting, as part of designing that in CAD-CAM, there was one other type of denture that I happened to see that I didn't even know we were still making, to be honest. And this is a titanium partial. And so this is also cast as well. This happens to be another one of those CAD-CAM cases. Again, we get a denser casting. The titanium is hard to cast. So when we do it with CAD-CAM, we get a denser casting and a better polish afterwards. And we're not sure exactly what eliminating the waxing does, the old way of doing it, but it does seem to improve the metallurgy. We're just not sure why. We just know it's actually happening. So you might say, well, why would I ever want any kind of titanium-based partial? And the demand's not super high for a product like this, but it is great for the patient that thinks they have metal allergies or actually has a metal allergy. So whether it's a female, for example, who breaks out with costume jewelry, or somebody who just suspects they are, or maybe it's completely psychosomatic, you now have something made out of titanium, the same type of titanium that we screw into your bone for an implant, non-reactive, been used in the body for decades, and we can now make your partial out of that MAM, so you don't have to worry about metal allergy. So another CAD-CAM partial denture here in titanium. You won't have a lot of use for it, but maybe there'll be 1 or 2 occasions a year while you want to use it. And the good news is it's now fabricated with CAD-CAM, so we're seeing better fit and lower returns.
Thank you for that, Dr. D.
My pleasure.
Now let's go to a segment we like to call Viewer Mail. This week's viewer mail comes to us from Dr. Kevin Baker. He writes to us from Iowa, and he says, "Hi, Dr. DeTola. I see so much about ceramic crowns and how they have essentially taken over the market. I have removed my fair share of PFM and gold crowns. Could you possibly review removal techniques of ceramic crowns, particularly with resin cement? This is something I think we might be finding ourselves doing more in the future. Thanks to you and Megan for the great videos."
That's a great question that you asked, because cutting off these new all ceramic crowns, and I'm guessing that you're talking about, say, Emax and Bruxer, for example, is definitely more difficult than taking off a standard PFM or even a gold crown. I've never really liked taking off gold crowns because of the way the burrs chatter, but this is kind of a different challenge because how difficult it is to cut through the material. And when I first tried to cut through a Bruxer crown, the burr that I used, the Bruxer crown just laughed at it as it stripped all the diamond particles off the shank. And it was a coarse burr, and so I asked my assistant to give me a turbo burr, the super coarse one. And I tried that one, and it stripped all the particles off the shank even faster. And I said, well, give me a coarse one again. And I tried that, and that didn't work. And because I'm pretty intelligent, I said, give me the super coarse again. And I tried that, and it still didn't work. And I didn't know what to do. And she said, well, here's a regular green stripe one, which is a regular grit. And so I tried that, and that actually made a dent in the zirconia. We were like, wow. So then I asked her for a fine grit burr, which didn't seem like it would do anything, but it did. It was the first one that really started to work on it. So it's very counterintuitive. You would expect that if you have to cut this tough crown off, you're going to need a very aggressive burr. But because of the nanoparticle size of these materials, it's exactly the opposite. So most companies, Axis Dental, for example, now makes a zirconia optimized burr, and it's got a blue stripe on it. And all the burr companies seem to have followed convention on this. So if you see a blue stripe on a diamond, it means it's been optimized for zirconia, and it would also work very well to take off Emax crowns. Now, the one thing you want to do differently versus cutting off a regular crown is typically we can just kind of lay into a crown when we want to cut it off. But the problem here is that the crowns are so tough, and the pressure that you need to push on it to exert against that crown to cut through it is enough that when you finally get through it and get to the tooth, you're going to do what I did the first couple times and kind of bury it into the tooth as you fly through the crown. And I would always turn to my assistant and I'd say, I've decided to put an anti-rotational groove here, when in reality I almost did an inadvertent hemisection of the molar that I was working on. So what I've learned to do to be careful since then is to take the burr and the crown, and we actually have a video on our website that shows me removing a Bruxer crown, which might make this a little more clear. But as we're cutting the crown, I'll take the middle third of the burr, so not the very tip of it, the middle third, and I'll work it against the middle portion of the crown. So I'm not going to start down here at the gingival margin or even on the occlusal, but right here on kind of the occlusal buccal line angle, towards the buccal a little bit, and I really just want to use that middle third to cut and look until I can see that I've gone through the crown in just a small spot and I've exposed some of the tooth. Once I see that I've exposed the tooth, then I start working my way down, or what I call unzipping the crown at this point, and trying to just work it down so once I've exposed the tooth, I can make that piece of tooth I've exposed longer till it goes all the way to the gingival margin and then up onto the occlusal surface. And then I'll cut through the occlusal surface on, say, the buccal half, and then the lingual half as well. And once I've done that, I'll just take a regular Christensen crown remover at a 90-degree angle and put it in there and snap it off. You asked specifically with resin cements. With resin cements, it's always kind of frustrating because you'll cut a crown in half, you'll pop it off, half of it comes off, the other half stays in place. So now you cut that half in half, so you've got 2 quarters and you pop it off and a quarter stays in place, and that's almost impossible to cut in half. And so with the resin cements, you're left with this last quarter, and you just have to prep it as though it were enamel, working your way back down to the tooth structure. It's pretty frustrating. I've been surprised. Even our resin-modified glass ionomers, like Reliax Luting Plus, when I go to pop off an Emax or a Bruxer that's on with that, I'm surprised how good the bond strength is to the dentin itself, although it's certainly easier than with a resin cement. So again, the key is not to take the burr and put it against the crown with the tip down by the gingival margin and push it in like we would on maybe a PFM or a CapTech crown or something like that. Use the middle part of the burr and pick just one spot and go down till you expose a small little island of tooth through the crown, and then unzip it in both directions. And I think you'll find that it's you'll have a much easier time. And certainly you want to use those blue stripe zirconia optimized burrs, because you're going to find that they make it a lot easier. Without them, you're going to go through 7 or 8 burrs on one crown perhaps to get them off. With it, I find that I only need 1 burr to be able to go through that zirconia crown. So thank you for your question, Kevin. And Megan, as this week's viewer mail, what might Kevin get? Would he get a zirconia optimized burr, which would be perfect because that's just what he asked for?
Even better. The Chairside Live.
Really? Is that even better?
I believe so.
All right.
Because who wouldn't want to hang this in their office?
Well, Kevin, I tell you what, this is totally unprecedented. I'm going to do this. We haven't done it yet. Megan, don't let me forget.
Okay.
I'm going to get one of those blue striped zirconia optimized burrs, and we're going to tape it to that photo right over my face and send it out to you, Kevin. So you're going to have the best of both worlds. You'll have still a nice picture of Megan, and then you'll have a burr that you can rip off my face, therefore not having to look at it anymore anytime you glimpse at the picture. Sorry, ladies in the office, but that's how it's got to be. Thank you, Megan. Any news?
Yes. A New York woman cracked several teeth on what she believes was a petrified peanut in a bag of M&Ms. She is suing the manufacturer of M&Ms, Mars Incorporated, and the Duane Reade where she bought the candy. The 47-year-old says she bit into the candies and broke her teeth. Her lawyer claims that either a foreign object was made into an M&M or it may have been a petrified peanut. The lawyer says the quality control at Mars is at fault for allowing this product to be put out for human consumption.
How is it everybody's using this term petrified peanut? I feel like if you look in the dictionary, I think there's an actual definition for petrified. Like we have the petrified forest,
of course.
The ancient bristlecone trees here in California, and they are literally petrified. Right. But I don't think this M&M has been outside for 2,000 years.
Right, there's no way.
And I've seen people break teeth on stuff like olive pits and things like that,
Sure.
but they've never broken multiple teeth like
Right.
she
I
did.
mean, and if you're just eating one, if she's eating one at a time, like how that couldn't even span multiple teeth because
Right.
they're not that big.
Unless she somehow got a hold of a rogue, huge M&M the size of say, an extra large brown chicken egg.
Right.
And then maybe if there was a petrified peanut inside, that would happen.
Sure.
I'm highly suspicious. Not only is that my favorite snack food, specifically the peanut ones, but she's in New York, the home of M&M World. She could go get them fresh, literally off the assembly line.
Right.
She's buying them at a rundown drugstore. You know they're going to be stale.
Not going to be good.
I vote I vote in favor of the defendant.
Yes.
Any other news?
Yes. Do you know what the #1 cavity-causing food in the world is? If you guessed some sort of sugary candy or soda, you are wrong. It is actually the saltine cracker. Saltine crackers are worse for your teeth because they're a fermentable and highly processed starch. The crackers contain genetically engineered ingredients, increasing the glycemic index, which makes the food more cariogenic. When you eat a saltine cracker, the bacteria in your mouth have a feast, so they multiply beyond the proper balance. Of course, it's not just saltine crackers. Anything with white refined flour will wreak havoc in your mouth. Be sure to choose whole grain crackers instead for your dental health.
Wow, I don't know how I'm going to get off the saltines.
Right. That's the funny thing because I thought, who eats saltines?
I don't know.
But at Christmas time, I do make this candy. And now I'm thinking about it when I was writing the story. I'm like, this has got to be the worst thing in the world that you could possibly ever eat for your teeth because it's called soda cracker candy. And essentially, it's like a homemade toffee brittle on top of saltine crackers with melted chocolate, and then it hardens. And it is seriously the best thing ever.
Really?
But yeah.
Oh,
But then that's the sugar coupled with then the saltine cracker. It has to be horrific for my dental health.
Yeah, that didn't sound fantastic. Any candy with salt. I'm just not a big saltines fan.
Okay, well, it's the salty sweet thing. I'll have to make some and bring it in.
I get that. I
and
get
then we'll
salted
brush our
caramel,
teeth.
but I'm just saying I don't think America's going to have a hard time giving up the saltine
Right.
crackers. If it was the peanut M&Ms, that's another story. But that white refined flour is evil. I was just reading a book this weekend talking about it's basically a diet where you don't eat anything white.
Right.
And that includes like dairy and the white refined flour. But if we are forcing America's kids to give up saltine crackers, I think they're going to be all right with
Yeah,
that.
I think they're going to be okay.
As long as we don't take away their Twinkies. All right. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at something we like to call
The end of the show.
the end of the show. Hey, welcome to episode 39 of Chairside Live,
What's up?
the bummer edition.
Well,
But see, I'd have to clear that with you because you have no idea what Footloose is, do you?
are you kidding me? Footloose, footloose, kick off your Sunday shoes. Ooh wee.
Wow.
So back up, okay?
All right. All right, let it roll strong.